A new year, but still the same unresolved issues at our nation's southern border. As the immigration crisis rages on, there is now a battle being fought on private lands across the southern U.S. With border agents busy processing migrants, border security is at times taking a back seat, leaving landowners on the front lines of a worsening reality. Undivided contributor Allie Bradley embedded with the Texas Department of Public Safety to see firsthand what this reality is like for not only ranchers, but the so-called runners.
The Texas DPS Elite Brush Team and Texas National Guard run through thick, thorny terrain and near-freezing temperatures. The teams on the ground follow the prompts from the air. I got two. Embedded with these crews, within 3 hours, we encountered 4 small groups in just one county, learning firsthand that these groups are not the family units we're seeing in Yuma, Arizona, or in Del Rio, Texas, where they're crossing the Rio and self-surrendering to border agents. Texas DPS Lieutenant Christopher Oliveira says the majority of these so-called runners we encountered were single adults from Mexico. Texas DPS made more than 2,500 arrests for criminal trespass since June. And it's those unprecedented numbers that are causing concern for some Texas ranch owners. Lisa Connolly and her family have a ranch in Kinney County. She says on average, she would see 5 or 6 migrants on their property in a year. Now it's happening daily.
I feel safer with it on.
Lisa, who is a retired elementary and high school teacher, now straps her pistol to her hip to go outside to water her plants or feed their dogs.
You know that you would use it if you needed to, but the thought of having to do that is so scary. If there was a real confrontation, how would that play out? What would I be? What would that be like? And I just pray that it's someone that wants to just continue to pass through, that they're not wanting to stop. But the reality is they're stopping. They're stopping at places.
And they're demanding things, well, give us water, give us food, give us a ride. No, get off my property. As long as they're on their property and they can carry a gun, they can have it on their hip, they can carry a rifle, whatever the case may be, to protect themselves.
Lisa says she's grateful that the Kinney County Sheriff supports the citizens living there.
Now, can they go out and just say, hey, they're on my property and shoot them? No, that's not how it works.
Customs and Border Protection reports show the number of people crossing into the U.S. has not slowed down. Sheriff Coe says he felt like his back was up against a wall.
According to the Texas Constitution, I can deputize people to help.
The sheriff said he was granted permission to deputize 10 people. He says he's already sworn in 3 who still have peace officer status. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has expanded Operation Lone Star several times, this time to allow for law enforcement on a state and county level to make arrests for criminal trespass.
The numbers haven't gone down. In fact, they've gone up. Their usual caseload a month is 10. Now
10
we're
a
looking
month.
at about, yeah. Now we're looking at about 600 a month.
According to Kinney County Attorney Brent Smith, they have made more than 2,000 arrests for criminal trespass since August. As part of Operation Lone Star, Texas DPS has installed thousands of cameras on private lands along the border.
It's not knowing who's on your property. It's also, we've had vehicles stolen. When I say we, the county residents have had a vehicle stolen. People being grabbed out of their truck at gates. Everyone's frustrated. Everyone's sick and tired of having this and not having their, peaceful right to their property.
Ranchers like the Connollys, whose livelihood depends on their land, say they're consistently having to make repairs to fences being cut by migrants or to water lines that have been severed.
So what does that mean for you?
That means that I get to work on weekends, which I'm going out right now to fix the water line. God calls you to be loving, of course, but that doesn't mean you need to disregard the laws of the land, and especially of the greatest nation in the world, the United States.
What is affecting us today is going to be affecting the rest of the United States in the months and weeks to come.
Allie, thanks for being here. That's some interesting stuff. When I look at this ranch family, is there any element of, they've just chalked this up to part of living so close to the border, or is there a real growing frustration for them?
Well, there is an absolute growing frustration for these families, and the Connollys aren't the only ones I've talked to either, Brandy. This is something that, a lot of people dismiss in the United States that aren't living along the border because we think, oh, it's a border community. They're used to immigration. They're used to crossings, things like that. but they're not used to these numbers. This is not a normalcy for them. Her having her gun attached to her is not normal for her. This is not something that these communities have dealt with to this magnitude.
Well, and one of the things I think is interesting is we're talking about a county and a ranch that's like 40 miles off of the US-Mexico border. And so then you get to thinking about, okay, if these are individuals who are coming across, they want to seek asylum, they're going to self-surrender, they would have done that, right, before they got to 40 miles into the US. So I guess what kind of alarm bells does that raise for these families and for law enforcement when they encounter people who are already that far into the interior?
Yeah, and that's what Lisa was telling me too, Brandy, is she was saying, what is their intent? Why are they coming through ranches and being smuggled in or having a guide or a coyote bring them through? Why don't they just go to Del Rio and get on a bus to what she says is Anywhere USA, which is what we are seeing, right? We are seeing these family units. We're seeing several people. We're seeing single adult men. I saw some from Uzbekistan come across and self-surrender. They purposefully go and look for these border agents so that they can claim asylum, because if they don't, they're just trespassing. Their hopes for asylum go out the door. You know, Lisa, her fear really comes from that. Why aren't they going to a port of entry? Why aren't they self-surrendering? What is their intent here? And that's what she said. And that's something that I mean, it doesn't matter how you slice it here. It doesn't matter if you can say there's one bad guy in a whole group of 5,000 or there's zero. That is a fear that is real for these people. And it's valid, right? They have every right to be scared, knowing those things that they know with the numbers, as I said, that we're seeing right now.
Well, I don't care if you live in Texas or if you live here in Washington State. I don't want anybody I don't know walking through my property, walking by my house.
Crazy is we're like on this slippery slope of like bending legalities, Brandy, because we're like, but they just want food and water. Oh, but they're not causing any harm. But they're still, like what Brent Smith was saying, the Kinney County attorney, the trespassing law has nothing to do with immigration. Mm-hmm. Are you on a property that you are not supposed to be on? Yes, that is a law, right? And we're going, okay, like it is something that the United States needs to take notice of, because it is a slippery slope right now.
Yeah, any of us living anywhere would have serious concerns if there are groups of people who we do not know walking through our property. That should be non-controversial.
Yeah. But for some reason, we're dismissing it. And I'm not sure. I think I don't know why. I honestly can't wrap my head around why we are kind of dismissing this as a non-problem.
Yeah, I guess, if I was one of these ranchers, I would wonder if there is a recourse for me. If the federal government cannot stop people from coming in great numbers into my land, from the southern border, I guess, is there anything that they can do? Can they sue the feds? Can they try some sort of recourse like that?
I mean, we know the governor there is constructing their own wall. We know that is a layer of protection for them. Lisa's saying that is something that might help. But at the end of the day, I mean, they just pretty much got to call Texas DPS and say, hey, come out and help us, or whatever it is. And as you heard the sheriff there saying, if there's a threat, I support them to use their firearm to protect their property and protect themselves.
Do you get any sense from the time that you first started covering the border to now that there is a growing willingness from the Biden administration to try to do more to secure the southern border? Absolutely not. Actually, the opposite, if you will. The policies that we've seen, we know the Biden administration had talked about the Trump era wall back in April about filling some holes. Now we're seeing that as well, right? So we do know that is happening. So that might be maybe a part, but realistically, the policies that they have actually pushed through when it comes to immigration reform, following Del Rio, where Mayorkas said our immigration system is broken, we heard him say that. The only things that they have done for policy reform or immigration reform when it comes to that, they have made it harder for border agents to do their job. We heard about those reparations that they were considering. Now that's off the table. Well, following that, DHS kind of put these stipulations on border agents saying you have to assess every situation that you're in when you encounter a migrant. I mean, all of us can argue that any interaction with a law enforcement officer could be traumatic. And so they have that piece that they're dealing with. We know that they have made it so that it's easier. You don't even have to renew visas. They will basically roll over because the system is so backed up. So from what I see and from where I sit,
it has become easier for people to come into our country. We have not secured the border. We know the border is porous. The one thing that they are doing is stepping back up and doing that wall when we know that Biden in his campaigning and in the beginning of his presidency vowed not to pick that back up. So, that isn't something the administration wanted to do. We know that from the start. So that's the only thing that is happening from where I'm sitting. But again, and now, we've got Operation Lone Star expanded to be able to charge on a state level, because this is a federal issue. They've always had to turn them over to border agents. Local police and municipalities and the sheriff's departments have always had to just turn them over to border agents. Well, now in Texas, the DPS and their sheriffs are able to get involved there too. So the Texas governor is doing things to empower the law enforcement and the citizens there as well to secure the border themselves, because they really, don't feel as though the administration is doing enough.
Let's end with this, because it just fascinates me. Texas is an interesting state, just in general.
Yes.
But the idea of deputizing people, can it just be any Joe Schmo where he's like, here's a badge?
Yeah. It doesn't say anything against that. Now, he does have his agenda for who he thinks, would be reasonable. He is looking for people that were former officers, people that obviously know the lay of the land. He wants local people, because there's no sense in having someone drive over from Del Rio when an incident is occurring. So, he could. There's nothing in the Texas Constitution that says it has to be a peace officer, that this person has to have a license even to carry. It just says that he can deputize 10 citizens, and he's already done that with 3. He's saying he's got one that's an ambulance driver. He has one that, if he has a chef, that person can come on and help. Like, he's looking for people that can bring something to the team as well. So yeah, put in your application, Brandy.
I'm going to take a hard pass on that one. I'm also going to take a hard pass at running through the brush after migrants. I'll leave that up to you. So that was quite the scene.
I got a lot of ripped, torn clothes. That is not for the faint of heart. It's not for the weak. I'll tell you that. Near freezing temperatures, your lungs feeling like you're going to explode after running for a mile under sheer adrenaline. And you're hearing these prompts from the helicopter and everything's coming at you. It was one of the craziest experiences of my life. And I'm already setting up to go back out there with them again.
That sounds good. Allie Bradley, independent journalist. Keep up the great work down at the border. It's been fascinating to see some of the things that you've captured on camera.
Thanks, Brandy.